My name is Kennedy, 35 years old, living alone in the suburbs of Boston. That night, I was having a late dinner when my phone buzzed, a voicemail from my niece, her voice trembling against the sound of the howling wind. Auntie, Mom got pushed outside, the door's locked, Harper's crying, there's blood. I froze. Outside, the snow was coming down thick. A level 4 blizzard warning had been issued. The whole state was sheltering in place, and yet my biological parents, the very people who preached virtue and family values, had thrown my sister and her two small children out into the storm. No coat, no explanation, not a shred of humanity. Have you ever been pushed aside by your own family? If this story strikes a chord with you, leave a comment below. Hit like if you've ever chosen what's right over staying silent. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happened after that night tore the mask off an entire powerful family. I was born into a family where everything had to be perfect to the point of suffocation. My father was the pastor of the town's largest church, always in sharp suits, speaking with moral authority and a stern gaze. My mother was a grade school teacher, her hair always in a tight bun, her voice soft but never allowing softness from anyone else. To outsiders, they were the picture of the ideal American family, disciplined, upright, peaceful. But inside that three-story wood-paneled house, perfection was just a mask. We weren't allowed to make mistakes. We weren't allowed to ask questions. We weren't allowed to show what really went on behind closed doors. I was the middle child. Emily was 3 years younger, and Hope was the eldest, always knowing the right things to say, doing the right things, dressing the right way, and living within the right lines. Even in high school, Hope was chosen to be the spokesperson at church events and helped Mom teach during summer Bible school. I was the opposite. I didn't know how to pretend. I loved painting, loved how the light spilled through windows and how brush strokes defied structure. That was wrong. I remember the way my father stared at the painting I made when I was 16, a dreamlike scene with messy lines. He tore it apart in front of me and said just one thing: "Don't let this nonsense distract you from God's path." I went to medical school because it was what the family wanted, trying to live as a second version of Hope. But in my third year, I dropped out. Not because I couldn't handle the academics, but because I couldn't bear living someone else's life. I had hoped, maybe naively, that I'd be understood, or at least heard. But when I told them, my father didn't say a word. He stood up, walked around the dining table, and slapped me across the face. "You're a disgrace to God," he said, like I was a stain that needed scrubbing off. I left home that night with a few clothes, a suitcase, and a couple tubes of paint. I thought Emily might come with me, but she only stood at the staircase, hugging her small frame, eyes red, lips silent. Emily had always been the agreeable one, quiet, obedient, always trying to please. As a child, she'd pull out chairs for Mom, make tea for Dad, and read scripture with Hope every Wednesday night. I once believed she genuinely bought into everything they taught. But later I realized it was a survival shell. Emily had no choice. Leaving would mean having nothing, and when she got married at 23, it was like our family exhaled, as if they'd finally slotted her into the mold they'd always expected. Her husband, Matthew, was once introduced by my father as a God-fearing man with a stable job who knows how to care for a family. I met him only twice. Once at Hope's wedding, he gripped Emily's wrist too hard when she accidentally spilled wine. The second time, when Emily visited me in Boston for a short weekend. She wore long sleeves in the middle of summer, and when I gently tugged the cuff, she flinched. There was a dark bruise on her wrist. "Just clumsy," she said, smiling with her mouth while her eyes looked away. I called home after that. I spoke with my mother. She was silent for a long time, then said, "A wife's duty isn't something others should meddle in. Your sister needs to learn how to keep her family intact." After that call, I shed every last illusion. To them, Emily was the final image of the ideal family. She couldn't be allowed to fall apart. Years passed. I stayed in Boston, opened a small art studio, and taught painting to kids on weekends. I never went home again. Thanksgiving and Christmas calls were brief, polite, never more than 3 minutes. But I kept tabs on Emily through social media and old friends. I knew she had 2 daughters. Chloe and Harper, and that Matthew left after a heated fight last April. Emily filed for divorce. That's when things began to crumble. I found out she had applied for legal aid to gain custody while temporarily unemployed. The application was denied, no clear reason. I asked someone I knew in the court system to check. The person who flagged not qualified on the file was Hope, my older sister, now working as an attorney at our father's office. In the notes, there was just one line: lacks financial and emotional stability. I called Emily after reading the file. She didn't answer. 2 days later, I got a text. Don't worry about me, everything's okay. But I knew that voice, the voice of someone trying to stand still while the ground beneath them is splitting open. I couldn't do much then except wait. Until that night. The night snow fell in thick sheets outside my window, and Chloe's message hit me like a blade, sharp, sudden, and right to the heart. That 8-year-old girl had called me when every other door was shut, and I, the disappointment, the godless one, was the only one who turned around. I drove through the storm that night. Every mile was layered with old dust from the past. But I didn't return to seek justice for myself. I came back for Emily, for Chloe, for Harper, because I had once walked away, and I wasn't going to abandon anyone ever again. I don't remember exactly how I braked at the edge of that gravel road, or how I threw myself out of the car into the biting wind. I only remember the sting in my palms as I grabbed the icy gate, the snow covering the steps, and the sight in front of me that nearly dropped me to my knees. Emily lay curled up on the front porch, half buried in snow up to her knees. No coat, only a thin sweater and a small blanket wrapped tightly around her body, nearly frozen. Chloe was holding Harper close, her tiny body trembling. Harper lay motionless under a damp blanket. I rushed forward, my knees sinking into the snow, trembling as I knelt beside them. "Emily," I whispered, touching her cheek, ice cold, lips pale. Chloe looked up, her eyes wide, cheeks raw from the cold, her voice barely audible. Auntie Kennedy." I took off my hat, wrapped it around Harper's head, then covered Chloe with my scarf. My hands shook from cold and fury. As I pulled Emily's arm to add more warmth to the girl's, I saw a long bruise trailing down her arm. Her knees were scraped, dried blood clinging. That wasn't from falling. That was from being dragged. I shouted toward the house, "Is anyone in there? Help!" No response, but I could see the living room lights were on. The curtains swayed slightly. I couldn't tell if it was the wind or a hand pulling back. I fumbled for my phone and called 91111. The dispatcher's voice cut through the blizzard in my ear like a lifeline. "We need an ambulance immediately. 1 adult and 2 children. Signs of severe hypothermia. Address is..." I read out my parents' home address, bitter and surreal. I set the phone down and sat on the porch, holding on to those 3 fragile bodies trying to survive, while the people who shared their blood were just steps away inside a warm house. No one came out. No one opened the door. That house just stood there, silent, as if nothing had happened. I pulled Emily closer, holding her frozen body with everything I had, rubbing Harper's hands, whispering to Chloe, "Hang in there, sweetheart. I'm here. It's okay now." She nodded. Her tears had long dried, but her eyes stayed locked on the front door like she was still waiting for a miracle. The sound of sirens pierced through the snowstorm. When I saw the red lights coming over the hill, I finally exhaled, though my throat was still tight. A neighbor, Mr. Buckley, who had lived across the street since I was in high school, quietly approached. At first, he didn't say anything, just looked at us. Then he knelt and said, "You should check the footage from my doorbell camera. Last night, there was an SUV parked out here for over an hour, lights off. I saw people going into your parents' house, not family." I looked at him, hand gripping Emily's sweater. "You mean strangers?" He nodded. "Around 10 o'clock, before the snow picked up. They brought something with them. I couldn't make it out through the snow, but later I saw your father open the door. A large man walked out with a child. Not either of these two. Then Emily was pushed outside. The door shut. My stomach dropped. I didn't fully understand what he meant, but puzzle pieces started shifting in my mind. You're saying there was another child? He didn't answer right away. I'm not sure, but I think so. I saved the footage. When you're done at the hospital, come by. I'll show you. At that moment, the medics rushed in. I stepped back immediately, making way for them. They quickly wrapped thermal blankets around the mother and children, secured oxygen masks, and lifted them onto stretchers. I stood up, took a few steps back, soaked to the bone. One of the responders turned to me and asked, "Are you coming with us?" I nodded. Before stepping into the ambulance, I glanced back at the house one last time. The lights were still on, the curtains still swayed gently, and the door remained shut. But I knew someone was standing behind it. Someone had witnessed everything and chose to do nothing. I climbed into the ambulance, still clutching the scarf. Emily had knitted it for my 20th birthday. I hadn't come home that year, only received a package with that scarf and a small handwritten note. Wherever you are, I believe in you. Now it was my turn to believe in Emily. And I wouldn't let anyone erase her from this family. No one. I curled up on a hard plastic chair in the emergency wing's hallway, my coat still damp with melting snow, my palms trembling no matter how hard I tried to stay calm. The ER door remained shut, the red light above it flashing in heavy, unrelenting pulses. Harper was taken in first. The nurses didn't say much, only repeating the same word, critical. Chloe had been wrapped in thermal blankets and taken for evaluation. Emily lay on the third stretcher, eyes closed, her chest rising gently beneath the oxygen mask. I couldn't erase the image of Harper's tiny hand dangling down, her fingers purple, almost lifeless. The attending doctor turned to me the moment we arrived, his voice urgent but steady. If she had arrived an hour later, her lungs might not have recovered. You saved all three of them. I only nodded. I couldn't speak. Not because I was overwhelmed with emotion, but because fear was starting to creep in. Not the fear of someone who had just survived disaster, but the fear of someone who sensed that what they saw was only the surface. Something deeper, darker, was waiting to emerge. A nurse approached me. "Miss Kennedy?" I looked up. "There are 2 people here to see you." I assumed it was the doctors, but when I followed her gesture, I saw a woman in a navy suit holding a slim folder, walking alongside a uniformed officer with a Brentontown badge. I stood up, heart pounding. The woman handed me her card. "I'm Jennifer Clark, Vermont Child Protective Services. We received a report regarding last night's incident. Would you be willing to speak with us in the counseling room?" I looked at her, then back at the still shut door where Emily and the kids were being cared for. "What incident?" I asked, my voice low, guided by a sinking intuition. She exchanged glances with the officer, then opened the folder. "There's a report claiming you unlawfully removed children from their legal residence without guardian permission. Additionally, the complainant alleges you used force against family members during the removal." I froze. "Who filed the report?" Jennifer didn't answer right away, but the officer did. "Mr. and Mrs. Frederick and Martha Benson. Your parents, correct?" I didn't respond immediately, not out of shock, but because I couldn't believe they'd go this far. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. "I brought my sister and her kids here because they were left outside in a blizzard. My sister was unconscious, Harper was turning blue from lack of oxygen, and Chloe was terrified. I didn't abduct anyone. I saved them." Jennifer jotted something down. "Do you have medical confirmation of their condition upon arrival?" "Yes," asked the attending physician. "They saw it all. And if needed, I can request footage from the neighbor's security camera. He told me it captured everything." She paused. "Good. We'll contact the hospital for cooperation. But for now, we have a legal obligation to clarify custody. According to temporary records, Mr. and Mrs. Benson are listed as the children's provisional guardians due to a denied petition filed by their mother last month. It felt like a bucket of cold water had been dumped over my head. Emily never mentioned they had custody. Jennifer studied me for a moment, then said gently, "We need to verify that. But if the Benson guardianship was approved, then by law, removing the children without consent may be viewed as a violation." I stayed silent. Inside, I was screaming. But I couldn't lose control. Not here, not now. The officer gave a slight nod, as if signaling that cooperation would ease things. I turned to Jennifer. "I'll answer any questions. But first, I need to know if my sister and the kids are safe. Has Harper stabilized?" Her expression softened slightly. "According to the doctors, her condition has improved, but they're still monitoring her closely." She closed the folder. "We'll meet with you in room 214 in 30 minutes. Officer Ramos will accompany us. If you need legal representation, we can wait." I nodded. They walked away. I watched their silhouettes fade down the hall, my hand gripping the scarf so tightly my knuckles turned white. I sank back into the chair. A young doctor passed by, paused, and asked gently, "Are you the one who brought in Emily Benson?" I nodded. He spoke slowly. "She regained consciousness briefly, but she's extremely disoriented. She asked where her kids are. Would you like to visit her?" I stood up immediately, just nodded. I needed to see her. I needed to know she was still here, still fighting. But more than anything, I needed to know she still believed in me. I didn't know when this legal scheme had been put into motion, but it was clear this wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was a chess match, and I had been pulled into the game long before I even realized it. I left Emily's hospital room with a heavy heart. She was still weak, her heart rate stable, but her mind hadn't yet escaped the fog. When I held her hand and whispered that the kids were being cared for, her eyes remained shut, her cracked lips trembling faintly. I didn't tell her about the meeting with CPS, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I couldn't bear to add more weight to shoulders that had just escaped the storm. As soon as I stepped outside the hospital, I called Alana, a former colleague from the art gallery, now a clerk in the Windham County Courthouse. She picked up on the second ring. "Alana, it's Kennedy. I need your help. Can you look into something for me? It's about Emily's custody case and the kids. There's talk my parents filed for temporary guardianship. Can you confirm that?" There was a pause on the other end, then a sigh. I heard whispers. "Give me a minute to check the internal records." 15 minutes later, she called back. Her voice had dropped an octave. "I just went through the system. Not only did they file for temporary custody, but they also attached an appendix describing Emily's psychological state. They claimed she suffered from severe postpartum depression and had exhibited harmful behavior toward herself and the kids." I nearly shouted into the phone. "That's not true." "I know," Alana said quickly, "but they even included a recording, about 2 minutes long. In it, Emily allegedly tells someone she feels overwhelmed, doesn't want to see her baby, and wishes she could disappear." I shut my eyes, breath growing ragged. "That's an edited recording, I'm certain. Emily once told me our mother secretly recorded her right after she had Harper, when she was sleep-deprived for days. She wasn't okay then, but she never harmed anyone." There was a pause on Alana's end. "Kennedy, I don't know if you want to hear this, but I also checked your family's property records. Something's wrong." I slumped over the steering wheel, gripping the phone. "Tell me." 2 months ago, Hope, your sister, acting as legal representative for your parents, signed documents to transfer management of the family farm and scholarship fund to a new legal entity, a nonprofit organization she co-founded. I went numb. What organization? They named it the Benson Renewed Family Foundation. Sounds nice, doesn't it? But the entire estate has been transferred under that entity's name, no longer tied to individual heirs. That includes the land, their shares in your parents' retirement fund, and the full cash reserve of the long-standing charity fund. You know, the one you built through those auctioned paintings? I leaned back in the chair, my head spinning. She moved everything into a private foundation and left me and Emily out? Exactly. And here's the other thing. They're planning to use Emily's so-called mental instability as the primary argument to gain custody of the kids. If that goes through, they could funnel all three children into the foundation's private support system as qualified special beneficiaries. I was speechless. I'd always known my family could be controlling, but I never imagined they would turn blood into a legal tool to seize power and wealth. I asked, whose signatures are on the foundation documents? Ilana answered, your father, your mother, and Hope, as co-founder, legal advisor, and co-trustee. Your name doesn't appear in any of the filings. My throat tightened. What about Emily? They listed her under subjects requiring supervised guardianship, a legal way of saying she's unfit to manage assets. As for you, they cited an incident from 8 years ago, that period when your solo exhibit got canceled and you took 3 months off for mental health. They used your own insurance records as proof. I closed my eyes. The puzzle pieces started falling into place. They hadn't just removed Emily. They had been planning to erase me, long before the blizzard ever happened. I opened my eyes, staring straight ahead. The years I tried to avoid them, the times I chose silence instead of conflict, had given them room to construct a narrative I was now forced to dismantle myself. I drew a slow breath, then said into the phone, my voice low and sharp as a blade, Ilana, I need certified copies of everything, as soon as humanly possible. She didn't hesitate. I'll encrypt the files and send them to your private email. And Kennedy? Yes? Be careful. What you're up against, it's not just a family anymore. It's a system. And systems don't forgive those who challenge them. I didn't sleep that night. Sitting in a cramped motel room less than 5 minutes from the hospital, I stared at my laptop screen, email tab open, waiting for Ilana's files. They hadn't arrived yet, but I couldn't just sit still. I needed my next move. I needed someone who could shift the ground beneath this whole situation before it was buried under cold legal jargon. I grabbed my phone and searched for Laura Merritt. We'd gone to college together. Laura once represented a student disowned by his family after coming out, and won full legal protection for him, derailing 3 court hearings with one sworn statement. Later, she moved into family law, specializing in divorce, custody, and advocacy for abuse survivors. We hadn't spoken in over 8 years, but when she answered, her voice was the same. Steady, no nonsense. This is Laura. It's Kennedy. I need your help. It's about Emily. A brief pause. Your sister, right? Tell me everything. I told her, from the blizzard, Chloe's message, Harper's condition, the dead silence from the house, to the documents Ilana had uncovered. When I finished, the line on the other end stayed quiet. Laura, you need to come to my office first thing tomorrow, bring everything, and Kennedy, do you have any video evidence? I remembered Mr. Buckley's words. There might be. The neighbor across the street said his security camera caught what happened that night. Don't let anyone tamper with it. Get it pulled immediately. You'll need a solid IT expert who can verify authenticity if this goes to court. Sam came to mind instantly, the guy who'd helped me recover encrypted files during a gallery copyright dispute. Sam wasn't a black hat hacker. He worked with nonprofits, specializing in digital security and abuse cases. I called him right after Laura. I didn't even need to explain much. He just said, send the address. I'll be there before sunrise. The next morning, the 3 of us met at Laura's office, a weathered red brick building near Brattleboro Town Hall. Sam showed up with image forensics tools and a portable drive. Mr. Buckley had already delivered the security footage, complete with a timestamp log. We sat around a scuffed oak table, morning light slanting through dusty blinds, scented faintly of old paper and coffee. Sam plugged in the drive. The screen lit up with footage from that night. No sound, but the image quality was crystal clear. My father stood in a dark robe at the front door. Emily stepped out, carrying Harper, with Chloe behind her, barefoot. He pointed toward the yard. Emily hesitated. Then something happened. A jerk. Harper nearly slipped from her arms. Chloe fell face first into the snow. My father grabbed Emily by the shoulder and shoved her. She slipped down the steps, her elbow slamming into the ground. The door slammed shut. I turned away, my fists clenched so hard my knuckles went pale. Laura inhaled sharply. That's indisputable evidence of forcibly removing someone from a residence during dangerous weather, witnessed by minors, causing injury, and the perpetrator is currently seeking legal custody. We can file an emergency no-contact order. What about Hope? I asked. Sam was scanning backup files from the law office where Hope worked. His fingers moved fast. There's a chain of internal emails between Hope and your mom, dated November 18th. Here. He projected the email on the screen. Mom, if we let Emily carry the third child to term, this whole thing collapses. The current system doesn't allow all three to qualify for special guardianship status if she retains legal rights. Push the paperwork through before December. I'll handle the county court filing. Kennedy isn't a threat. She's never held a role in our legal family structure. I read it word by word like chewing glass. Laura didn't hesitate. She pulled a packet from her drawer and began filling out forms. We're filing for an emergency protective order for Emily and the children. I'll also initiate countersuits for family abuse, evidence tampering, and violations of Vermont's juvenile protection statute. I nodded without hesitation. Laura signed the final form. These papers will reach the judge in under 2 hours. After that, we'll have legal grounds to keep the children with their mother and block any moves from the Bensons. I looked at her, my voice quiet but firm. Thank you for not asking me if I'm sure, because I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I walked into the courtroom in a soft tan coat, hair tied back, the morning sun cutting through the tall windows and brushing my shoulders like a reminder. Every step I took today would be seen, recorded, not just by the judge and attorneys, but by the faces behind the gallery benches, the local reporters, church community members, even a few neighbors who once smiled politely at me during last year's Christmas Eve service. They came for the rumors, but today they were about to witness the one thing my family never wanted anyone to see: the truth. Laura had warned me beforehand. Stay calm, be clear, no dramatics. You're not here to beg. You're here to set the record straight. I nodded back then, but now, seeing my parents already seated across the table, Dad in his familiar navy blue suit, Mom wearing the beige scarf she always used when she wanted to appear composed, my throat suddenly went dry. They didn't look at me. Not once. The hearing began promptly at 8:30 a.m. Judge Patterson, an older man with silver hair and a slow yet commanding voice, reviewed the reasons for the session: an emergency petition for guardianship filed by Mr. and Mrs. Benson, my countersuit as the temporary guardian, and submitted evidence of endangerment toward minors. My parents' attorney, Mr. Halcombe, was the first to rise. Your Honor, we submit a certified copy of a 2018 document in which Miss Kennedy Benson voluntarily relinquished all roles related to family guardianship due to mental health concerns. The document bears her signature and notarization. He placed the file on the table. I didn't move. Laura calmly retrieved an envelope from her briefcase and laid it on our side of the table. Your Honor, Laura began, not loud, not aggressive, but each word sharp like wind slicing through paper. We had that signature examined by a forensic specialist. The conclusion: the signature does not belong to my client. Furthermore, at the time this document was allegedly signed and notarized, Miss Benson was attending an art symposium in New York, almost 200 miles from the notarization location. The judge looked up. Do you have verified proof of this? Laura nodded. We're calling a witness, Mr. David Kaplan. A middle-aged man stepped to the stand, wearing a security guard uniform. His graying hair neatly combed, shift log in hand, he spoke plainly but with confidence. I'm the night guard at the Hudson Convention Center. Ms. Benson arrived the evening before, remained on site throughout the exhibit. I personally checked her badge the following morning. She did not leave the premises. The judge gave a slight nod. Laura continued. In addition to this testimony, we have extracted security footage from the venue's entrance and confirmation emails from the symposium organizers. Ms. Benson signed the attendance sheet at 10 a.m., the same hour the forged document was supposedly signed. The air in the courtroom seemed to pause. I looked directly at my mother. Her eyes never left the table. Her fingers tightened slightly on the edge of her scarf. A small motion, but I recognized it. It meant she was unsettled. Mr. Halcombe tried to maintain his composure. Then my clients, Mr. and Mrs. Benson, must have been misled. We'll investigate the true origin of that document. Laura didn't let the moment slip. Your Honor, submitting a forged legal document to change guardianship isn't a simple mistake. It's a serious offense. Combined with previously submitted evidence of abuse, we request the immediate suspension of all guardianship claims made by the plaintiff. The judge rested his hand on his forehead, eyes scanning the files before him, slowly turning to the next page. I couldn't hear the paper, but my heartbeat echoed loud enough. In his gaze, I saw something I hadn't felt in years under my parents' roof. True deliberation, not a verdict predetermined. We'll proceed with this case based on the newly presented evidence, he said, and I will consider referring the document's origin to an independent investigative body. For now, the current guardianship remains unchanged. The children will stay with Miss Kennedy Benson and their biological mother. I hadn't misheard. I gripped Laura's hand, unable to show much more than a look of quiet gratitude. We hadn't won yet, but we were no longer cornered, and to me that alone felt like sunlight cracking through a sealed wall. Later, I sat at Laura's desk, warm lamplight spreading over the clutter of open documents, my eyes fixed on Sam's laptop screen. His face was tense, brows drawn, fingers gliding across the keyboard like he was tracing a hidden thread through a maze of data. Anything? I asked, my voice hoarse with fatigue. Sam didn't respond right away. He pushed his chair back slightly and turned the screen toward me and Laura. I just traced the ownership trail of the Benson Renewed Family Foundation. On the surface, everything checks out. But when I compared the digital signature in the registration file to previous tax records from the old trust fund, he pointed to two samples displayed side by side. It says the signature belongs to Mr. Frederick Benson, your father, but the encryption format doesn't match any of his officially registered notarization accounts. Laura leaned forward immediately. Are you certain? Sam nodded. And there's more. In an encrypted email thread from the law firm where Hope works, there's a message exchange between her and a financial partner. I crack the subject line. The date aligns with the fund's transfer filing. The subject reads, Signature proxy confirmed. Do not expose source IP. My stomach twisted. Hope? Forged our father's signature? Sam adjusted his glasses and spoke quietly. She didn't just forge it. She transferred 70% of the trust's assets into a new subtrust under her name, the H. Benson Development Trust, and she's the sole administrator. Laura closed her eyes for a few seconds, then stood and walked to her filing cabinet, pulling out a thick folder. We've got enough to request a criminal investigation, but if you want to move faster, there's another way. I looked at her. What are you thinking? Call Hope directly, ask her to meet without attorneys. We give her a choice, cooperate fully, hand over all forged documentation, and in return, receive immunity in exchange for forfeiting any claims to the assets. If she refuses, we file everything. I hesitated. She won't show up. Laura looked at me, voice firm. She's a lawyer and she knows when the law is about to close in. She'll come. The meeting was set for 2 days later in a neutral office Laura rented. A small, soundproof glass room, a round table and 3 chairs. Hope arrived exactly on time, wearing a charcoal gray coat, hair in a tight bun, face unreadable. She sat down calmly, crossed her legs, and rested her hands on the table like it was just another strategy session. Laura spoke first. Thank you for coming. Hope gave a faint smile. I came out of curiosity. What do you think you're going to threaten me with? I said nothing. I simply pushed the laptop toward her. Sam had cued the digital signature verification program extracted from her law firm's internal records. She stared at the screen. Her eyes moved slightly. One eyelid twitched. Laura remained composed. You have 2 options. 1, we submit this to the district attorney's office. 2. You sign a formal relinquishment of all rights to the misappropriated assets and cooperate as a witness to validate the forged documents submitted by your parents. Hope didn't speak for nearly a full minute. Finally, she exhaled, removed her glasses, and placed them on the table. "We all know my parents couldn't draft a single legal paper without me," she said, voice low. "They asked me because they thought I was the best. And I took advantage." Laura stayed neutral. "So you're choosing option 2? Hope nodded. "On one condition. I want full immunity. I can't afford to lose my law license." Laura nodded. "We'll recommend it to the DA if your cooperation is complete." Hope turned to me, for the first time that day, truly looking into my eyes. "You've won, Kennedy," she said. Not with anger, not with coldness, just a simple statement, as if finally accepting something she had long known. I didn't respond. I simply watched as she took out a pen and signed the relinquishment document. Her hand trembled slightly, but the signature was steady, the handwriting all too familiar. The perfect daughter of my family had just unmasked herself, right in front of her own reflection. And at that table, the very storm they created finally swept up the one who led it. The final hearing was scheduled for a February morning, when the snow had begun to melt into small puddles along the steps of City Hall. I arrived an hour early, standing for a long moment in front of the tall glass doors, hands in my coat pockets, my mind unusually quiet. Not calm, just a stillness that comes after passing through every road of doubt. Inside the courtroom, the seats were already full, some taken by reporters, others by townsfolk who had once listened to my father preach every Sunday. They looked at me, said nothing, but there were no more eyes avoiding mine. Emily sat beside me. She wore a pale blue dress, her hair loosely tied back, hands clasped tightly in her lap, trembling slightly. I placed my hand over hers, feeling the rapid yet steady pulse beneath her skin. "They can't take the kids from you anymore," I whispered, just loud enough for the two of us. Judge Patterson entered the room, his gaze no longer wary like it had been at the start. He read aloud the decision after reviewing all the files, evidence, and testimonies, confirmed over the course of 4 weeks of hearings. "After thoroughly examining all evidence and reports from the Department of Child Welfare, I hereby grant full legal custody of the 3 minors to their biological mother, Miss Emily Benson. The temporary emergency guardianship, executed by Miss Kennedy Benson under critical circumstances, is deemed lawful and life-preserving." No one spoke, but I heard Emily exhale, a soft sigh of relief. Tears quietly rolled down her cheeks as she turned to look at me, saying nothing. The judge continued, his voice still calm, but each word firm, like the click of a lock sealing shut. "As for Mr. Frederick and Mrs. Martha Benson, due to actions threatening the safety of minors, this court revokes all custodial rights and temporarily suspends visitation privileges. Should either party wish to regain future contact, they must complete a supervised psychological treatment program and undergo reassessment for child-rearing competency as per state regulations." I glanced across the aisle. My father sat upright, lips pressed tightly, eyes fixed on the small cross behind the judge's bench. My mother bowed her head, hands clutching her beige scarf like it was the last thread holding together the image she'd tried so hard to maintain. But it wasn't over. "Laura Rose. Your Honor, we submit a notice regarding the preliminary findings from the Vermont Bar Ethics Committee concerning Ms. Hope Benson." The judge nodded. Laura handed over the documents. "During the investigation, Ms. Hope Benson admitted to forging signatures, illegally transferring assets from the family trust, and exploiting a charitable organization for personal gain. She is currently under the supervision of the district attorney's office and has officially resigned from the legal profession." There were no gasps, no whispers, but the room sank into a heavy silence, the kind where downfall speaks without making a sound. Hope wasn't present that day. She had signed a cooperation agreement and was granted immunity from criminal prosecution, but the price she paid was her reputation, her career, and her role in a family she once represented as a symbol of perfection. The judge nodded again. These records will be forwarded to the appropriate agencies. The court also confirms that the Benson Charity Foundation, previously co-managed by Mr. Frederick Benson, is now frozen pending investigation into financial fraud. I thought of all the ceremonies at church where my father used to speak about love, sacrifice, and responsibility to the community. I thought of the elderly who once received aid from that fund, the children awarded scholarships funded by money built on hidden truths. And I wondered, what is the greater loss in all this? The wealth or the trust? 1 week later, the town church officially issued a statement requesting my father's resignation as head pastor. There were no protests, no banners, just a row of empty pews on Sunday morning, until he stood behind the pulpit with no one left to listen. As for me, I didn't feel like I'd won. There was no triumph in exposing my own family, but I felt like I had done the right thing. And to me, that was the only thing that still stood when everything else had fallen. 6 months later, I moved to Oregon with Emily and the 3 kids. Our small house nestled on a green hillside with a red dirt path leading to a backyard where wild daisies surrounded a wooden swing. No tall fences, no fancy doorbells, just the wind, bird song, and the sound of children laughing every afternoon. We didn't need much. Every morning I woke up early to make breakfast, brewed coffee for Emily, and we walked the kids to school together. Harper loved wearing her yellow dress, while the 2 boys usually fought over who got to ride on the back of the bike. Emily still looked tired on stormy days, but her eyes no longer seemed distant. Sometimes I'd catch her standing by the living room window, watching dry leaves swirl in the wind, and smiling without even realizing it. The living room became the warmest part of our home. In the corner by the fireplace, I hung a painting I finished on the first snowy night. A portrait of the 3 children standing among pine trees, snow falling all around, each of them wearing a red scarf fluttering in the breeze. I named the painting Witnesses in the Wind. I don't paint to forget, I paint to remember. Dinner was always the time we sat together, talking about everything and nothing. One evening, Emily told a story about how, when she was little, their mom forbade her from eating ice cream because girls aren't supposed to be fat. The kids stared wide eyes. I said, "Now you can eat as much as you like, as long as you brush your teeth after." Harper burst into laughter, her mouth covered in ketchup. At night, after the kids were asleep, Emily and I often sat out on the porch, cups of hot tea in hand, feet propped up on the wooden bench. The night sky in Oregon was unusually clear. I tilted my head back to look at the stars, thinking about the road we had traveled. Some wounds I once thought would never heal, and yet somehow they became the very places where light found its way in. "Do you regret it?" I asked one night, my voice raspy after a long day teaching art at the town school. Emily shook her head, eyes fixed on the tree line in the distance. "If you hadn't come that night, I don't think I'd still be alive, not just physically, but inside." I gently squeezed her hand. There was nothing more to say. Between us, at that moment, no words were needed. I knew that to our parents, I might always be the rebellious daughter, and to the community where they once preached, we might just be a deleted chapter from the pretty story they had written. But to those 3 kids, to Emily, and to myself, the truth had been returned. We were no longer victims. We were witnesses to the truth. Once, I was invited to an art exhibit in Portland, themed Rebirth from Cold Earth. When the curator asked what I wanted printed on my biography card, I wrote just one line, a storyteller of what many tried to bury. On the way home, Harper fell asleep in the back seat, a comic book slipping from her lap. Emily looked back at her, eyes glistening. "Why do you still cry so easily?" I teased gently. "Because now I'm allowed to." I turned my eyes back to the road, the breeze drifting through the cracked window, carrying the scent of fresh pine and damp soil. Life doesn't give back what we've lost, but it can open a new door, if we dare to walk through it. And even now, I still find myself wondering the same question I believe anyone who's faced painful choices has thought about at some point. If you stood at a crossroads, one path being what's right, the other being what's easy, which would you choose? Because the life we're living, whether peaceful or full of storms, is shaped by the choices we make. Doing the right thing isn't always easy, and what's easy doesn't always bring real peace. I'm telling this story not just to recall a memory, but so that you, the one listening, might take a moment to reflect on your own life. If it were you, caught between family pressure, social expectations, and hidden pain, would you stay silent, or would you rise to protect what's right? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment and let me know, who did you resonate with? Have you ever gone through something similar? I'll read every word, because sometimes what you share might become a light for someone else, still in the dark. And if this story touched something deep inside you, follow the channel so you don't miss the next journeys to come. There are still stories waiting to be told, hidden corners inside seemingly perfect families, and truths buried beneath what we call tradition.